Hi, I'm Gabriel Deverens from the Walkable Ottawa podcast. We are a homegrown initiative focused on transitioning Ottawa's neighborhoods into more walkable communities. We interview key stakeholders, industry leaders, and community members to see how we can build a better Ottawa of tomorrow. On today's episode, we have Jason Burggraaf, the Executive Director of the Greater Ottawa Home Builders Association. GOBA is the leading voice for all builders, developers, and renovators in Ottawa since 1951. We have a great chat about the role of their organization in regards to the City of Ottawa's new official plan. I hope you enjoy our conversation. Jason, welcome.
Thanks for having me. I'm really happy to have this discussion.
Yeah, I'm really happy to kind of chat about the exciting few months ahead in light of the new official plan coming out from the City of Ottawa over the next few months.
Yeah, there's been a lot of good proposals coming down the pike, and neighborhoods are going to change quite a bit over the next few years to a decade or so.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Felt like Groundhog Day. Yeah, it was like a Bill Murray special. That's funny. Yeah, is that kind of what you're looking for?
That's good. Yeah, I just was hoping to.
It's the actual town. Grew up there after high school. Came to university here at Carleton.
Okay.
To do journalism. Moved into political science there. Always had a kind of a dream of being in public policy. Vaguely working on Parliament Hill was kind of why I came to Ottawa originally. I did volunteer there for a little bit as I was in my studies, and then got to a couple of different spots policy-wise, and luckily I got a job at the Canadian Home Builders originally.
Okay.
I did a couple of different jobs there over a course of 15 years.
Wow.
And in that time, I got to learn a lot about housing, a lot about the industry, and a lot about the association work with home building. And luckily, the Greater Ottawa Home Builders, their executive director retired, and I was in the right time in my life to be able to want to really take that on. And luckily, they chose me to do it, and I've been there just over 2 years now, almost 2.5 really.
Interesting.
And it's been a great ride so far.
Yeah. So I guess it's a pretty interesting perspective to have the kind of national perspective on the housing industry and then kind of applying some of those principles on a local level.
Yeah, I mean, every level of government has its jurisdiction in housing. With the feds do model building codes, but also do mortgages and things like that. The province does mortgage code, does building codes officially, but then it also does the Planning Act and things, and a lot of housing policy like that. And then, of course, when you get to the municipal level, it's the real on the ground stuff in terms of zoning and heights and densities and where things can go, what types of homes can go where. So it's really the rubber hits the road here at the municipal level.
Interesting. And then, so what does GOBA do essentially? Like, what's their roles? What's their responsibilities? What's their mission?
So the job is really to be the voice of the residential construction industry.
Okay.
So we represent home builders, renovators, service providers, trades, everyone who's involved in building residential housing. Not just single family homes, obviously, but towns, row houses, short and tall rentals, as well as condos. Any if you live in it, then our builders build it.
Okay. So
our membership represents about 85% of all the housing that gets built in town, all the new housing that gets built in town in a given year. So it's quite a robust portion of the industry.
So I guess you would have a nice mix of people within the housing industry. So you'd have the smaller builders who build maybe a few houses per year to some of the bigger builders, which are responsible for a few of the high rises in town.
Yeah, there's kind of two groups. There's about a half a dozen to 10 really big builders that build, say, over 100 homes a year. And then there's kind of a break. There's not much activity sort of in between that 100 and then, say, about 20, let's say. And then, and then there's a bunch of people who do 20 or less. And those are more your custom builders and guys who do infill and pieces and, smaller multi-units like that.
Okay.
So there's kind of two groups that operate, that, do the vast majority of the work.
And what are the objectives? I guess it's just to have one common voice for all of the constituencies.
Yeah, my job is to kind of, to coordinate and present a common voice for the industry. So that, say, City Hall, when they're working on zoning plans, when they're working on other housing policies, don't have to reach out to 80 different companies, right? They reach out to us, and we then coordinate sort of everyone's thoughts and feelings about something. Draw that up and bring it back to the city. So that way, it's kind of, you when you're consulting with us, you're really consulting with you can feel represented. That we're representing the voice of the industry.
You mentioned some of the thoughts and feelings of the housing industry,
right?
How would you describe those at the moment?
Good. It's there was obviously a lot of concern about COVID and how that would impact activity. But luckily for us, certainly the city was dedicated to keeping things open and dedicated to keeping, planning approvals open, to keeping, building inspections open so that work for, building people's homes could continue. I mean, in Ottawa, 500 to 600 people a month move into a new home.
Wow.
So, those people need those homes. And when COVID happened and there was a bigger shutdown across the province, you've got hundreds upon hundreds of families who are a few days, a week, 2 weeks, maybe 6 weeks away from moving into their house. And of course, a lot of them were scared about what was going to happen and how that was going to affect them. So it was really great to see the provincial government keep the industry open so that those people could get into their housing.
I think it's, from my perspective, it was in the first wave of COVID from mid-March. There were pretty startling projections made by CMHC saying that the housing prices in Ottawa would fall 10 to 20, or across Canada would fall 10 to 20%. And then you fast track 6 or 8 months later, and kind of the opposite has kind of happened. Whereas the average sale price of a residential home on the Ottawa Real Estate Board, by the time the year is done, will have gone up actually 15 to 20%. So it's hard. It's been an adjustment period for a lot of people, but it's been very unpredictable, I find.
Yeah, I mean, CMHC has a certain kind of outlook, and their job is to be conservative. And their job is, really to protect mortgages and to protect Canadians' indebiture with their mortgages. So, I personally find that kind of tempers their outlook on housing markets, and they tend to be more doom and gloom about things. But realistically, as we saw, activity in resales, activity in new home sales didn't really stop. And, building, of course, didn't stop because the houses we're building today were sold 6 months, a year ago, 18 months ago. So all those people are waiting for those homes. And people kept buying throughout COVID because it's not like they're turning it around, and moving into a new house in 3 months. So it's that activity is, really important. I think it's underplayed, at least certainly in the Ottawa context, of how much pent up demand there really is. Just in terms of how many, the sheer population growth that we're getting every year, the number of immigrants, the shed of people we get from Montreal and Toronto and kind of the environs in between. There's been a lot of kind of focus on Ottawa's interplay between Toronto and Montreal in the build on the official plan. And the housing activity, reflects that. The number of people who who come in, they all need housing. And that's going to really support Ottawa's housing activity for many years to come yet.
Yeah. Speaking of what are the projections for Ottawa? Like what is Ottawa slated to grow over the next 5, 10, 20 years?
So I'm trying to remember exactly what the number is, but say this year, we're going to do about 7,500 new homes alone. And that's, rule of thumb is generally like 2.2 people per house. So you can kind of see the population growth from there. But over, say, the life of the official plan, which goes out to 2046, they're expecting 400,000 new people and 194,000 new homes.
Wow.
So you're still averaging somewhere between 6,000 and 7,000 a year. Now the projections, when you break it out year by year, there'll be more in the front end of that. And then it's supposed to peter down to, say, 6 or so near the second half. But we'll see where those projections go as the as the forecasting moves out. It gets harder and harder to know what that exact number will be.
Yeah, I
But
find that.
I expect it to be high for a while yet.
Yeah, I think so too. I think like those projections, from my understanding, came before COVID.
Yes.
So before people could work from home, before, and if you have a household where two people are working from home, and doesn't really matter where they are, it gives a lot more reasons to relocate across Canada,
Yep.
or maybe to outlying areas where housing affordability is significantly less. And I've seen myself practically as a real estate agent, a lot of people coming in from Toronto who are like, okay, well, I can buy a house for half the price. That seems like a good deal. Like, still
Even
work
into
from home,
Ottawa?
keep my job. Yeah.
Wow. Because I mean, I've gotten from my colleagues, of course, that like say even as far as Peterborough is quite busy, and it's all Toronto, people moving into Peterborough,
Yeah.
and that far out. But even to Ottawa now, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a real question about. I mean, it's way too early to make assumptions, but there is certainly a real question of what is COVID and sort of its lingering after effects in terms of the psyche of where you live.
Mm.
Right. And we'll look at the numbers. I mean, obviously right now the numbers are strong for moving into suburban areas in Ottawa. And I mean, it was like that before.
Mm-hmm.
Will it temper people's want to move into more denser neighborhoods? I don't know.
Or maybe even the opposite.
Well, that's what I mean. Yeah.
Even less denser neighborhoods.
Well, that's kind of the question, right?
Areas.
Like we'll watch the activity very closely, as I'm sure municipalities will and everybody will, to kind of see. It's really unknown right now how that's going to affect sort of, long-term housing trends.
Uh-huh.
We'll just have to kind of wait and see, I think.
Yeah, I don't think there's ever been a time where there's been so much movement of people and such drastic change to consumer behavior and consumer trends.
Yeah.
So have you found some of the changes or impacts of COVID already being felt by some of the builders in Ottawa? Are they changing their business model, or have they changed the way they do things?
Nothing has really affected that right yet, because as I said, the stuff that's being built today and being planned to build, over the next few months has been sold a long time ago, right? So you're just delivering on those contracts at this point. It's when we start seeing kind of future builds, in another 6 months, in another year, say, we'll get a much better sense of where activity is kind of pushing out. But sales were never really dipped for pieces overall. For outside especially, and move to the suburbs, which has kind of been happening for a long time in Ottawa anyway.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of the future, we have the new official plan.
Yes.
The draft from the City of Ottawa is supposed to be coming out in the next few months. What is GOBA looking for within that new official plan?
The most interesting thing will be now where in the intensification houses will go. Like the city has established its target of having 60% intensification by 2046. And it's got the number of houses and all types of houses, not just, we tend to think of intensification just as, apartment buildings or condos, but that's, it's also townhouses and single family homes and housing form that kind of is about the same size as a single family home, but it's actually, 3 units or, or 4 units or long semis.
Yeah.
It's a variety of home types. And what'll be the most important part is to see where the city anticipates that intensification to go, where those new houses will go, what streets and what areas of town will be upzoned to say, okay, what used to be 2 stories a limit now you'll be able to go up to 4 upon doing, new infill projects.
So I guess within the new official plan, we're kind of expecting to have a map of the, let's focus on the urban within the Greenbelt in Ottawa for now. So we'll have a map, and there'll be certain, I guess, strategic areas that are close to LRT stations that buildings are closer to the end of life expectancy. That's
right. I mean, you can see it even there's mapping out right now looking at the Westboro infill study. That's a particular policy piece that we're just looking at. And there's a literal map of here's Churchill Avenue. The proposal is Churchill Avenue goes up to 4 stories all the way across, and Byron and Claire, Byron and Dalhousie,
Kirkwood.
Anyway, I forget which, Dovercourt.
Dovercourt, that's the one.
Yeah. Byron and Dovercourt on the west side can go up to 3 stories.
Okay.
So, we're expecting to see mapping as detailed as that to say, okay, here's if you're along a major street that, likely is on a bus route that can likely, if it doesn't have bicycle infrastructure now, can accommodate that. If you can have sort of those multi-mode transportations, then you're that's where the intensification is going to go. Mm-hmm. And that'll be the most interesting thing to see. And then we can see how many houses are going to be accommodated, within existing neighborhoods.
Interesting. Yeah, I know. I live in Overbrook,
right,
in Ottawa, and that's it's a gentrifying neighborhood. And how I came to join Walkable Ottawa was Rosalind Hill, a local architect and development consultant, approached me because of my past experience with the Overbrook Community Association. So I was the chair of the planning development committee there for 3 years. And one of the things that I noticed on, apart from the number of applications for minor variance and site plan control in Overbrook, was the appetite for a bigger vision for what the neighborhood of tomorrow will look like.
Yes.
And from doing some of the public consultations through Walkable Ottawa, where we've segmented the city's neighborhoods in 4 different types of neighborhoods, realized that there was a lot of appetite for that. That, people see the infill developments, they see the high rise, but there doesn't seem to be a bit of a holistic vision on what their neighborhood of tomorrow will look like.
Right. And I think the overall official plan will help get us there with that, and kind of give people an idea of what missing middle housing types and what sort of that gentle densification is going to look like.
What do you mean by that, gentle density?
It's we're not going to achieve density by building 10-story towers on corners, right? There's going to be more 3-story, more 4-story along, on those major corridors and any major collector roads. That's where there'll be buildups along there, and then the sort of those internal local roads will stay more low rise oriented, but you might see again more units in a housing form that still looks that's no bigger than a regular single family house. But that's where that's the city's plan anyway, is to focus all that intensification along those transportation corridors. So that'll be interesting to kind of see how much can be accommodated, and then really. I appreciate the idea of wanting to kind of have an overall vision kind of moving forward. And I think it is important to try to articulate it so that people can understand what the bigger picture is to go forward. But it's also important to remember neighborhoods are always evolving, right? And they're constantly changing. The makeup of the neighborhood is changing. And even the vision that we articulate today for a Westboro or an Overbrook, for 20 years from now, 10 years from now, that vision is going to have to change a little again, as what actually gets built, and then what more intensification we might need. Every neighborhood is going to have to kind of have that thought of, yes, there's a vision, and there'll be we're going to have sort of this characteristic, but that's also still going to modify and change over time.
Yeah, I guess it's very interesting from speaking to people through Walkable Ottawa and getting their perspectives. And I find there's some excitement. It is an exciting time. If you look over Ottawa's history, I think there's going to be a big wave of construction similar to what there was after the Second World War between 1945 to 1965 over the next 20 years.
Right.
But there seems to be a kind of built up, I guess, skepticism between residents and builders when a smaller builder or a bigger builder purchases a plot of land. Do you have any reason why that would be? And I guess just to kind of finish that thought, so I guess the practical example is somebody sees that white City of Ottawa sign, and then they say 4 stories, or this is what the zoning allows or proposes, and this is what the applicant is building. And then practically the people who are not zoning, urban planners or architects or developers, like, well, why are they building something greater than what they're allowed? Do you expect how do we address that sentiment and build that confidence within residents of Ottawa to make sure that we all collectively buy in within kind of building the city of Ottawa of tomorrow?
So I think part of the gap, and I'll touch on it briefly again, is I think the official plan will help address that. Is that a lot of the zoning that's in place now can't accommodate the demand for intensification that we even have in the city.
Okay.
Now, right? Areas that are zoned along, bigger roads, major roads that have buses, that have bicycle, infrastructure, aren't zoned properly, right? That's the type of housing that you want there is that that missing middle, 3-4 stories that can accommodate multiple units, that can accommodate more families than what's currently sitting there. The current zoning in place isn't the proper spot for the kind of city Ottawa wants to be, and I think people intrinsically want the city to be more dense, and even in existing neighborhoods, want that, because there's numerous benefits to increasing your density as well, right? Typically, you're going to get more shops, so you're going to get more food. There's going to be more likelihood of a grocery store being closer. There's your public amenities can typically go up because there's demand, because you have just that sheer amount of people living in a neighborhood, right? So I think it's the zoning hasn't caught up to Ottawa's growth, and we're expecting the official plan to kind of do that major leap to get back up to catch up to where we're going.
When was the last official plan done?
It was done, say 10 years ago, but it was just a kind of a revamp. And again, then if you jump back 10 years before that, there was sort of an official plan cobbled together from all the different plans.
I see.
When Ottawa was still a regional municipality, right?
Yeah.
So even now, the official plan we have is still that cobbled together sort of Frankenstein from all the different municipalities.
I see.
This one is really kind of Ottawa's first true City of Ottawa plan,
I guess
as a whole. Yeah, since amalgamation, 20 years ago. Since that time, that's really this is its first real overall vision as one united city.
Yeah, because I remember I saw a stat that spoke about the landmass of the municipality of Ottawa compared to other municipalities across Canada.
Sure. And
the landmass of the municipality of Ottawa is pretty alarming how big it is compared to other cities.
Yeah, I've seen that too. Obviously it's true, right?
Yeah.
Like the sheer boundary from one end of the city to the other, the municipal boundary is quite large.
Yeah.
But I think the Ottawa we really think of in terms of, say, it's most of its serviced area, anything, if you discount the rural actual rural lands, if you think about where actually OC Transpo goes.
Okay, that's a good measure.
Right, from the east end to the west end. That's really about 13.5% of that bigger landmass.
Okay.
Right. So it's Ottawa. Yes, Ottawa is big in the technical sense, but where the vast majority, like what we think of as the city of Ottawa, right, is only a fraction of that in reality. So we do occupy a pretty dense space. Again, of 13% of that entire big land mass.
Yeah. So one of the things I've noticed within my involvement with Walkable Ottawa is that careful relationship between density, but also having kind of respecting of the existing residents who live there, right? And within walkability, the whole premise is you have stuff to walk to.
Yeah.
And within that definition, or that technical definition of walkability, is where one has all of their services, grocery store, pharmacy, chiropractor, you name it, within 750 meters.
Yep.
There's certain neighborhoods that I believe will have an easier time getting there to that threshold of truly being walkable, where somebody can leave the car at home or forego the second car, forego the car altogether. But how realistic is it, do you think, to have neighborhoods, like all the neighborhoods within the urban Ottawa, become walkable?
I think we can certainly get there. Some neighborhoods are, like you said, are going to take a lot more effort than others. Some are kind of more what we consider on the brink. I think to steal maybe from Rosalind a little, one of the observations she makes, and I don't know if she made it in her talk yet because it hasn't come out, but is walkable in the winter. It's very, it'll be very, it's very different to be walkable in the summertime when it's nice out versus Ottawa's winter time. So we do have to kind of think about that piece for sure. But to my mind, the biggest gap we have in achieving sort of walkable neighborhoods is that storefront idea.
Okay.
And especially getting smaller storefronts, where there are small pieces that can provide a variety of services or baked goods, or if there is just a bakery only, or or a tailor or whatever you want to choose.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the biggest, that's the real, to my mind, the real hurdle that we're going to have to figure out the answer to. And it kind of goes back, or at least someone else once explained it to me like this, and it has a lot to do with the financing.
Okay.
Of kind of, especially if you think about a bigger building, or bigger apartment building that say has retail on the bottom, in that the people who pay for that building to be built, the financiers often want to see kind of anchor tenants, right? They want someone who's willing to sign on for a 20-year lease to be able to front, that way you have that confirmed cash paying out to pay for the upfront capital that you do. And that really narrows the types of businesses that can go in, right? As you're looking at a bank or something of that, something similar, which obviously doesn't have much activity or much engagement with the street level after certain hours, when that's exactly what you wanted in the neighborhood, right? So it's we got to kind of figure out how we move away from that model where the anchor tenant who demands a big floor space goes in, to where we can build a building that has retail on the main level, but it's 3 or 4 or 5 storefronts versus 1. And people who are moving into that kind of space can't sign a 10-year lease either, right? So we, maybe a year or 2 or what have you. That's the gap I think, in financing those types of buildings that we need to figure out.
Okay.
To make the jump.
And within the context of the new official plan, do you expect the city to kind of name certain arteries within certain neighborhoods that are now residential for their zoning to be changed to become commercial, to allow those more local mom and pop style of operations?
So to reach back to the Westboro infill study again, along Byron, it's going to be there's a classification of like neighborhood residential. It's kind of called. So your storefront wouldn't be any bigger than what a regular house would be. Okay. It would just be sort of that first floor of that house, right? At the ground level could accommodate retail or a small commercial space. And so there's going to be certainly a lot more of those designations across those types of roads across the city.
What do you think is the biggest obstacle we have? Because I think talking to different people, whether it's residents, certain nonprofit organizations, talking to people from the building industry, it seems like there is a greater consensus on what we want, but there doesn't seem to be that collaboration between all of the major groups. How do we get everybody on board on one vision?
I think it's moving in that direction. And it really kind of comes down to, I think, demand at the street level, demand from residents and demand from storefronts and people who are going to open those little shops to say, this is the type of storefront I want to be in. Yeah. And I'm willing to, go out and get the effort of talking with city staff and planners and whomever else in order that there'll be more of those spaces available. I think there is an evolution to that, and people are kind of moving closer together to getting towards that. Like ourselves, we've been really excited about what Walkable Ottawa is doing, but so has FCM, so has Ecology Ottawa, right? So all those groups, which sometimes are not always on the same side of the table, I think are kind of coalescing a lot about what a 15-minute community and what it's going to take to achieve those. And everyone's it's those objectives are good for all of those groups.
Yeah. Given the existing City of Ottawa zoning framework, what type of housing do you find is encouraged or has been built since the last revision of the official plan? And what type of housing units are we looking for to be built in the years to come? And how do we make sure that we meet have that wide variety of housing supply on the open market?
So, especially in terms of infill, what you've kind of seen are either if it's not a single family home that replaces a single family home, you tend to see semis, of course, because that's what the zoning often forces you to do, or you see what industry at least refers to as like a long semi.
Yeah.
So that it's got sort of the outlook of a semi on the outside, but it's cut into two units and a third unit in the basement, or there's 3 units and the basement becomes a 4th unit. Many of the kind of the architects and designers across town will tell you that the zoning kind of forces you to build that type of thing right now. What we're hoping with the official plan is it's starting the process of moving zoning from use. So to say, hey, along this street, you can have a single family that is so high, or a townhouse that can have a few more feet. It'll hopefully kind of we're starting to move away from the idea of these are where townhouses go, these are where single family houses go, to here is the lot of land. And then on the lot of land, there's a box. We want you to provide so much space on the left side, so much space on the right side, so you can walk, in between.
Yeah.
We want you to back up from the back of the lot so far so that there's some green space so that you're not on top of your neighbor. And that creates, a box on that land for you to build on. And then whatever you want in that box, go to town.
Okay.
Right. And there'll be a height, obviously.
Yeah.
Right? But then, so the idea, it's called form-based building.
Okay.
Or form-based zoning rather. And the idea is, it frames the box, and then whatever you're doing in the box is fine. It's a single, it's four units, in a house. It's 3 stories and the bottom is commercial, or, that neighborhood level kind of commercial, whatever it is. But that would be the ideal, is to kind of move more forward towards that, and slowly, it takes time for everyone to kind of come around to that kind of thinking. But slowly but surely, I feel like it's kind of progressing more that way.
Yeah.
And that would be, I think that's the kind of zoning situation we need to get that variety.
Is there any other municipalities or other examples of places who have used or have moved to more form-based zoning, or is this a new concept? Or
now you're stretching beyond my knowledge of it now, so I honestly don't know.
Okay.
And I honestly don't know what how many others have used it. Clearly, it's not a new concept that we came up with, for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
So I'll look into that one.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'd be curious to know, because
question on that one later.
I think, like, practically speaking, I think for anybody who's tried to dissect the zoning bylaw, it's a little bit tricky.
There's a lot going on.
Yeah, and it seems like there's been appendix added onto appendix. So having this kind of overhaul, and I guess this is kind of the flagship new official plan from the City of Ottawa, because what you said earlier I thought was very interesting, where it's been 20 years since the amalgamation. We have the latest official plan, which was about 10 years ago, which was a bit piecemealed, I guess. And now this is the opportunity now for the City of Ottawa collectively to kind of make the vision for place to come. Do you find that there's some challenges within simplifying the zoning code? Like, because when you speak about form-based housing and providing or alleviating some of the restrictions between what can happen within that box, how do we make sure that it still meets the intention of the zoning bylaw? Because now there is certain uses that are permitted by the zoning bylaw that are not being built, even though that's kind of what we want. I'm thinking more specifically to like the R4 zones.
Yep.
If you look at that business model, it makes it tricky once you fall over 4 units and you need a certain critical mass of amount of a certain size of building.
Yeah.
Which leads you to still bigger buildings,
Well, and that's where it starts. There's so much more to think about past the zoning. Once you kind of get the zoning in a place where you think it accommodates the variety of buildings that you want to build, and it actually kind of facilitates multi-units, especially, in say the R4, then you have to start thinking about all the other factors of what's the pro forma of building a building that size, how many units can there be, how big are they, what's the selling point, can you sell them for or rent them for the cost that it's going to, can you cover the cost of the construction of the building, can you make a profit on it so that you can keep the doors open tomorrow. You've got to start working on all those pieces then on top of it. How many regulations does it have around it if there's site plan control? So, there's in terms of you have to get all your planning approvals, but then if there's site plan control, there's a number of other pieces that you have to work with the city on and get their agreement in terms of garbage. And if there's cars going in or out, and there's a number of pieces like that. So it goes beyond zoning real quick.
Yeah.
To think about all the other things that you need to achieve. But we chip away at each of those pieces, to kind of get a variety going.
Can we speak a bit about that? So I guess the difference between, so what is it, at 3 or 4 units, then it triggers site plan control, and what does site plan control entail?
I could be corrected. I believe site plan control right now is more than 12 units. Or no, sorry, no, you're right. I think more than 6.
I think
it's lower.
I think it's 4.
Okay,
frankly.
it could be. I'm willing to.
Yeah.
I'm willing to. To defer to you on that one. But so again, I'm not an expert on particularly building that piece.
Yeah.
But then it's about how do you handle the garbage for multiple units? Is there an underground garage? Where did the cars kind of come in and out? It programs kind of the lot a lot more. But that's additional time, additional effort, additional planning, additional burden, additional approvals that all have their own fees. To get on board with a lot of additional time to get approvals, and time is money, as it is in anything.
Of course.
And that only that adds to the cost of building that building. So it's all got to be kind of considered.
And I guess within just kind of looking around the city, you don't see a lot of newly built 6 units, 12 unit buildings, compared to just kind of traveling across Canada, before all of this kind of happened.
Right.
And I guess that would just kind of suggest that the business plan doesn't make sense to build. When you have a certain plot of land, that the business plan doesn't make sense to build, certain low-rise buildings where there's 6, 8, 9, 10, 12 units.
Yeah. But it is improving all the time.
Yeah.
Right? Like zoning, R4 zoning just got changed, in the past couple of weeks, right? There's more transit oriented areas now where you'll be within a few minutes walk of LRT or of a rapid bus station, right? And that makes those types of buildings much more feasible because you can live there without a car.
Yeah.
So that that kind of makes living there much more palpable.
Yeah.
So slowly we evolve into that ideal situation.
Yeah. How does I guess I'm gonna go. So we've heard a lot of buzz around 50-minute neighborhoods,
right?
And Walkable Ottawa, it speaks about walkability, but it encompasses a lot of different things. I've heard a lot of the analogy around an airplane where you have multiple facets, you need multiple pieces of the airplane all to be working at once in order to achieve walkability. Can you speak about the careful relationship between density and walkability, as well as the community involvement and political acceptance required so a neighborhood can transition to walkability?
I think I don't want to put words in anyone's mouth, but what I often hear back is kind of communities are okay to see more density, but they need those other things. They need those storefronts. They need the grocery store, to be walkable nearby. They need parks to be, provide, more green space, because you're going to have more people walking around, right? You need a community center, or you need a bigger community center or an upgraded one. So I think just like you observed, there's a lot of parts to a 15-minute walkable neighborhood, and ideally you get them all pretty much at the same time, and it's hard to deliver all of those pieces all at once. But that's kind of, that if you want all of them to be able to kind of to make that nice complete community, and it's typically you kind of see the influx of the density first before you see the upgrades of anything else, because a lot of things are based on demand and usage. And OC Transpo doesn't just put bus routes wherever. There's feasibility studies, and they look at how many people are crossing roads or going wherever, how many people are in a certain neighborhood to run a new route. So those types of things are done for everything, including private businesses. Is there enough population base in this walkable circle of 5 minutes or 15 minutes to have enough people who are going to buy my bread, right? Or the dry cleaners, or whatever other the store is going to be. And that's kind of the real trick of it, is you've got to prove that you have the density and the population base in order to get these other things. And that's the kind of part that typically comes first.
So do you think the first part comes from the private sector by just having that increased density of housing, and then having the services kind of built in within that community, or is it the other way around?
I don't know if it's necessarily always got to be sort of one before the other, but my feeling is that you typically see the population increase first, right, and then people say, oh, there's a lot of people around here, I can open up a small restaurant, restaurant to service them. You're not going to have the restaurant say, move into a neighborhood that doesn't have very much density and say, okay, I'm going to assume people are going to move into this place, in the next little bit. So typically your density is certainly going to come first. But as we see bigger projects, you see really big projects come on stream now, ones that include, say, towers. Typically you see them program a retail space now as well, especially, say, around LeBreton Flats. You see that a lot, and the idea of, okay, we're actively trying to get a grocery store to come in. Yeah. Right. And we're dedicated to trying to do that, to bring it into that, part of the area. So more and more you see bigger projects like that come on stream too, which is great.
I have I've noticed a lot of growth in municipalities just outside of the municipality of Ottawa. So Almont, Arnprior, Limoges, Rockland. Why do you think that is?
It's affordability, plain and simple. And it's, we're, like I said, kind of much earlier, that, you can't overestimate the sheer just amount of people coming into the city, right? And the demands on housing. And that simply there's not enough housing to kind of go around for everyone. And people are making the choice of saying, okay, I want a certain type of house. I can't afford it, within the city limits. So I'm going to go to a Carleton Place or an Arnprior or Rockland, where I can get that house. And like we said before, also, now that you require less travel for work, if you're only traveling into the office once a week, that moving out to those outside municipalities becomes more and more palpable and less of a burden to do so. It's hard to know how that's going to evolve moving forward as we really try to boost up the amount of housing that's within the city limits and within the built up part of the city. But there will always be some portion of people who will, that's the choice that they make. And perhaps they want to move out into a more, a smaller town as well. And they just appreciate that lifestyle. They want to be closer to the Ottawa River. Who knows There's all sorts of reasons why people choose to live where they live, and like any of us, they look at the lifestyle they kind of want, because where you live in the city and the type of house you have does contribute and dictate a lot of your lifestyle. If you have a lifestyle where you want to be able just to lock the door, kind of forget it, not have to do much property maintenance, you want to travel, then a condo sort of downtown, or a condo, within the city works really well, because you lock the door and you don't have to worry, right? You don't have to worry about mowing the lawn. My father-in-law, for instance, loves mowing his lawn, and he would never give it up in a million years, right? So,
yeah, or his barbecue.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And he lives in Arran, right? And he would never give that up. Like he wouldn't know what to do with himself.
Yeah.
So people kind of make those decisions about what they want, what kind of house will provide them the best balance, and then they also have to balance that with what they can afford. So right now we're seeing, and it's not just Ottawa, obviously. Like as we said before, it's you're seeing it from Toronto a lot.
Yeah.
Of people moving to Peterborough and to London and to Ottawa because they can't afford that within the city. So it's just a population movement kind of does happen. We're seeing kind of more right now. If you look at the statistics of the people kind of moving out there, it does edge out. Those are the people who tend to be sort of want to buy that first-ish home. Like the bigger number of people who are moving out tend to be in that kind of 24 to 39 kind of age, and are looking to kind of settle their roots, and they've decided to do that in a town that's just outside the borders.
Do you find I find in my line of work, I've noticed that there's not many options. Like I think of like my parents, for example. My dad loves his barbecue, but he doesn't see himself, like they were empty nesters. The house has been empty for 10 years or so. But they haven't seemed to found a adult oriented community or lifestyle, or there doesn't seem to be many of those options being built today. And it seemed like, from my perspective, I think if there's a lot of long-term residents who have been in their homes for a long time, who are contemplating downsizing, but are having issues finding the types of housing options that would make sense for them.
Sure.
Have you noticed a bit of a trend in terms of having communities that work for some of the older demographic?
Yeah, there's not as much it's not really much of a thing, is it? As much, adult lifestyle communities, like you can kind of think they're pretty prevalent in the States. But it's not really, at least an Ottawa thing. I don't know if it is, if it's a thing in Canada as such.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. I mean, there are even there's kind of more ones like out in Kempville. There's one around the golf golf course there, and that tends to be quite older adult oriented, right?
We have to choose our words carefully.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
A couple of millennials going at it. Yeah.
But to be honest, what the feedback we kind of get and what we're seeing, especially in the renovation side, is people wanting to stay in their homes, because they don't want to leave their neighborhood.
Right.
And of course, there's also the consideration that if you sold your home, you'd still spend just as much money that you made in order to buy something else. For sure. Typically, even if you tried to downsize a little, because everything has, gone up in price. But in fact, what we see is overall, or there's a bigger contingent of people who want to stay in their homes than we thought there would be. There was a conception that people would become empty nesters and they would leave their homes in the suburbs and move into downtown so that they could be closer to amenities, and they wouldn't have, they'd move into apartments or whatever, so there wasn't so much space they had to clean or whatever else. But over, in the aggregate, there's a much bigger population that stayed in their homes. Like the people next to me, I'm out in New Orleans, and the people next to me are, late 80s, early 90s, in a home that was, they raised like 3 girls in, right? Is that way too much for a house for them? Well, I mean, I don't know who's the one who gets to decide whether they're overhoused or not, but clearly they don't need that much space, right? But that's the neighborhood they know and love, and it's It's the home that they know. So you certainly can't fault any individual for the housing choices that they make about where they want, where they choose to live.
Yeah.
An interesting thing I've also kind of been given in terms of feedback on sort of that older population and them staying in their homes is, especially if you end up, with more health concerns, or say, your eyesight goes down in your, in your home, where everything is. You intrinsically know that it's 12 paces from the couch to the kitchen, or right. And even if you can't, or if how far the coffee table is from the couch, even if maybe you've lost a fair amount of eyesight and you can't necessarily see it all that well. Yeah. Your body knows, right? So it makes it all that much harder to leave that kind of space. So we're seeing a lot of people hold on to their houses much longer, and all those empty nesters aren't leaving the nest anymore to make to open up those bigger houses for families. The upcoming families, which have gotten smaller, of course, in and of themselves, but yeah, it's I found actually quite overall that the phenomenon is people staying in their homes. Yeah,
I think so too. I think part of it is because the kids are staying at home a little bit longer.
There's that too. There's always a fear boomerang of children who come back and might have to come back in.
There's a few of those. But I think also within some of the boomerang children, if we're allowed to call them that, it's just housing affordability.
Yes.
It takes, it's quite expensive to live as a single person and find some place to live under, $1,200, $1,500, $2,000 a month. And one of the things that I've really noticed since kind of the start of the pandemic is a rising cost of construction. My brother is a contractor, and he's told me, can't believe the cost of a 2x4 has gone up by so much, or every single building product. So how do you see the additional increased construction cost come into play when we're already on the cusp of an affordability crisis here in Ottawa?
I think, cost of a product it doesn't tend to drop very much, right? Things just generally tend to increase in cost no matter what you're talking about. But it's certainly true that building materials have gone up, and there's been an acute kind of jump related to COVID because of the shutdowns of mills, right? And the number of people who stayed home and decided to do a little project or redo their deck, put on more demand on wood products, even in retail shops that people weren't expecting, right, at the time. And only now are mills kind of coming back online. But we're seeing it, across any number of building pieces. If bricks, there's kind of two major brick company, people that groups that make bricks. One has, say, two kilns, right? But it takes a lot. It's like running any gigantic power station, right? You can't just fire it up, for a few hours and then shut her down again. Like, it's a big effort to get that thing going. So, you've got to kind of pick and choose what you run. And building products across the board are kind of the same, right? So we're seeing, there hasn't been much shortage in Ottawa overall. And we were hearing more reports about shortages sort of in southwestern Ontario, especially with wood. But certainly, the price has certainly gone up, and there are times you'll find specific pieces, you won't be able to find at a retail, at a Rona or a Home Depot, as it were. But the only real way to kind of combat that affordability issue is you need to get more homes on the ground. Yeah. Right. And then, related to that is you need more people to be the the skilled trades to build those houses. Because, the costs of that are also going up in terms of just having people on the ground, because there's so much demand to have houses built, and there's only so many framers, there's only so many bricklayers, there's only so many plumbers or electricians to kind of go around. So everyone is on a dead run right now. And we need more people to kind of get into those trades so that we can build them more houses.
What is the solution for that? Getting more, because there is, just from my perspective, I don't know what the numbers are, but I've heard as much as a few thousand missing tradespeople in the Ottawa region just to kind of keep up with the
There are. I don't have a specific number for Ottawa itself, but over the next, say, 10 years, their stats are that the residential construction industry alone is going to lose about 100,000 people, skilled trades from retirements, right? And the problem is really kind of cultural, right? I mean, I don't know about you, me and you are probably around the same age, I would assume. But when I was, going through high school, there wasn't anybody kind of pushing people to get into trades anymore, at that time. We've kind of gone through a generation, maybe even two, where no one was kind of, skilled trades or going into the tradescraft wasn't something that people were pushed on as a kind of a first choice career. Despite the fact that, in fact, the benefits of being a tradesperson has never really kind of gone away in terms of, making money right away and coming out with no debt and all the benefits that can kind of come from that. It was kind of, it was really kind of downgraded as a job. Let's call a spade, right?
Yeah.
And it's been very hard to kind of churn the channel on that line of thinking. But we're slowly kind of doing so as, less people kind of tend to go to it's more people understand now that university is not the end all be all of schooling and the end all be all of what you have to do out of high school, right? Colleges have gotten way more prestigious over the past little bit, and vocations have become, it's starting to kind of build back up again. And we need to do more of that and really kind of make the communication, not only just to students, especially not even ones at the end of high school who are looking for the next step, but, earlier in their years when they're kind of starting to program out maybe what they're going to start doing,
for sure,
in that, grade 8, grade 9 kind of area, but also the parents, right? And whip it on people like me and people, 10 years younger and 10 years old, people who are, who have those children who would actually support their kids going into, going into into a trades. I pointed out every time to my, I have two boys, one's 14 and one is 9. And so when we do have, we had to had the person come in to do our seasonal furnace thing. Right. Yeah. And, she came in and she was fantastic and kind of whipped through. And I try to take those opportunities now to kind of impress, look, you can, this is, it's
earn a great wage.
You can earn a great wage and get on the go and be your own boss. And
for sure.
Yeah, one of I think the two things I really want to start emphasizing about trades, especially, is the entrepreneurship of them. Because ultimately, the vast majority of companies in residential construction, for sure, are started by people who used to be tradesmen for somebody else.
Yeah. Right.
And, and then they broke off and started their own business. And the other part is really the contribution to energy efficiency. And I think there's going to be a big market for that sort of, if you want to contribute to the reduction of greenhouse gases and you want to contribute to, environmental objectives, especially in building, in residential building, but the commercial or whatever, be a tradesperson and you can make an active contribution to improving the environment, improving the energy performance of a building. By doing that kind of work and having more influence if you decide to go on and again start your own company and build those types of pieces of buildings. So those are kind of the real two big I think hooks, if it will, about how we need to kind of bring more people on stream to be tradespeople.
What kind of efforts or certain focuses are being made about kind of making homes more efficient and making sure that we meet some of our climate objectives, which are still far out, but it takes obviously a lot of time to kind of get there.
Well, so the building code is sort of, if you take the building code as a base, it's energy, the performance, energy performance within the building code in and of itself improves every iteration, and it gets redone sort of every 5 years. And the building envelope gets better, the products get better, the insulation gets better, right? The design of those pieces of the building assembly in itself, and the design of a wall and how it kind of all comes together gets better, and is constantly going through an evolving process. And then that gets codified in the building code later on. But then there's a number of builders who who do that step up from above that. There's a number of labels that reflect sort of that next step up in terms of either Energy Star, which we typically attend to appliances, but there's buildings as well for that, or R2000 or net zero energy.
Okay.
Ottawa, luckily, has a great number of kind of those bleeding edge builders who are really kind of pushing energy efficiency and trying to get it to that next level of being mass marketed. We're seeing Oakwood, who typically was more renovations, but now have kind of moved into that custom building, I think, space as well. Just opened up just launched a net zero house that they did a couple of weeks ago. And, now they've got 12 more on the docket for over the next year and a half or so. So I feel like energy efficiency on that kind of scale, it's just about getting over, over and getting mass market. And getting kind of everyone to really kind of jump in and see. And as you get, it's kind of a bit of a chicken and an egg, right? Because you want the products, the feature products and the equipment to kind of go down in price. But the only way they go down in price is if they're used more, right? So you kind of need them to be used across the board. And slowly but surely, we're kind of seeing that overall. In terms of the city, the city's direction, the city just did its energy evolution modeling, which is part of its climate change master plan.
Okay.
And then it's got a commitment to reduce greenhouse gases by 100% by 2050. So energy evolution is sort of the modeling of what are the actions, what are the strategies that we have to undertake in order to get those reductions. So that breaks down into a number of slices of different pie in terms of transportation and buildings, both residential and non-residential, and both new and used, about energy production, about solid waste, what you do with that. But one of the pieces that I'm most excited about, I'm hoping kind of really gets a takeoff, is retrofitting existing houses.
Okay.
All right.
There used to be a program through the province of Ontario.
There was one for, at the federal level as well.
Okay.
And we're always pushing to kind of have that go back. But retrofitting an existing house, especially one that's over 15, 20, 30 years old, that's where you'll really find you can make significant gains in energy performance with, the most minimal outlay. We always kind of think about really big, spectacular energy stuff like fuel switching from natural gas to electricity, and putting in heat pumps and all that. And you can certainly do all those things, but there's lots of low hanging fruit
for sure,
within your home that you can do, especially if it's older.
Yeah.
To increase its energy performance overall.
So we're talking about maybe adding insulation in the attic, newer windows, spray foam.
Exactly.
Okay.
Right. A lot of things that the outlay is not as much as you would think. Right.
Yeah.
So hopefully the city wants to pursue this kind of program to encourage and help defer the costs of these things. And they're exploring that sort of idea of, can you add it on and pay it over installments and time on your taxes or something, of that nature. Right. So because the capital cost can be, a big portion up front. And that's a hard pill for some people to swallow, especially if they don't necessarily plan to stay in that house for that entire time, right? So you've got to be able to kind of figure out how the payback will work for people. So I really think that the Retrofit Accelerator program is going to be a real crown for the residential part, which again is just a slice of the entire pie. But it's going to be it's modeled out to be like 22% of the greenhouse gas reductions that they want to achieve. So I really want to see the effort and the resourcing put behind it.
Yeah, to me, it's great. I think it's a multi-pronged. I mean, there's multiple facets and there's a lot of different ways of getting there. But I still, personally, I believe that moving to 15-minute neighborhoods and where anybody can have all of their services within 750 meters is probably the single biggest thing that we can do to kind of combat climate change, where we have everything at our disposal, within a few blocks away. And I hope that some of those initiatives will come to fruition. Because as a resident, I'm born and raised in Ottawa. I've lived here my whole life. I went to school in Montreal and came back to Ottawa. And I find it's such a beautiful city.
Right.
You know, we're blessed with parks and rivers, and it's a nation's capital, and it's so exciting. There's so many, you know, there's museums, and there's every government building that's around.
Mm-hmm.
And I hope that Ottawa becomes the kind of leads the next page forward in terms of becoming a bit more of a green city and lead the way in terms of meeting our climate objectives. And I'm really hopeful for the draft of the new official plan to come out and for that collaborative process to kind of make its way through. And that's why I appreciate you so much coming out today.
Oh, you're more than welcome.
Yeah, and appreciate some of the other dialogues that we've had with other nonprofit organizations, because like you said earlier in the podcast or in this episode, you know, local politics is where everything happens. It's where a resident or an individual has the most say in what most affects their daily life. So, yeah. How are we doing on time? Okay, cool. Yeah, so we'll probably wrap up in a few minutes, but anything else you want to chat about? Or kind of hit on? And go through my list of questions.
Yeah. It's
very interesting, very free flowing.
No, I'm glad. I'm glad to do it. It's
collaborative. Yeah,
it's an interesting intersection between intensification and energy efficiency.
Yeah,
for sure. And there'll be a lot of evolving in that situation yet.
Where can we finish it off? What could we circle back to? I guess we could circle back around the official plan. Yeah. What do you hope to see? Like, how do we make this happen? Is there three kind of key takeaways or key principles or key things that GOBA is looking for within the new official plan?
Well, like I said earlier, the biggest certainly is the intensification mapping.
Mm-hmm.
They might not use that word, because it's got different connotations to it. So they might use a different word, but kind of, you know, where growth is expected to land, you know, along what streets. I think I can't overemphasize, I think, how much that's going to contribute to that overall vision, and to really kind of settle people, you know, settle neighborhoods in terms of, okay, where is the growth going to go, you know, over the next 10, 20 years, and really kind of settle of, okay, this is going to be the more, you know, the more multi-units are going to go along these streets, right? Because there's the bicycle, because there's the bus, because there's the infrastructure, because there's ground floor retail, in terms of that, you know, that walkable neighborhood. I really think that's the really great evolution in this official plan, where that's really going to kind of jump up and, you know, provide that kind of intensification that I think people are going to actually be quite happy about. And then it's really a question of, you know, there'll be zoning after that. They'll do sort of the official plan as kind of your guidebook, and then there'll be, despite, you know, we've done a lot of work on infill in our for zoning, because we want to address, you know, issues that were already pre-existing. There'll be another nice, you know, we'll get a chance to kind of redo zoning, with the directions from the official plan in place. And hopefully sort of that will be the next step where we can kind of evolve into that form-based zoning, which I kind of talked about earlier.
Yeah.
And then it's really a matter of thinking about, certainly in terms of walkability, let's think of the next stage, because I think we've kind of focused a lot on those neighborhoods that I would describe as sort of more on the brink of walkability, right? Like the ones who have kind of make the least amount of effort before we'd consider them walkable, and some people would consider walkable now. Let's start thinking ahead to the next stage, you know, the next type of neighborhoods that have, again, a little less density, a little less storefront, but those would be the next in line to evolve. over, and what is it that we need to do? What do we need to port over from the lessons we're going to learn over the next few months to a year and so, and what changes, what kind of extra things we'll have to think about if there isn't sort of a main street cluster for that kind of vision to kind of center around, like Westboro kind of centers around this Byron corridor kind of idea. If there isn't a similar geographical setup, what's the evolution of a neighborhood that's kind of more local streets?
That's right.
Right.
Yeah.
And doesn't necessarily cater itself to that pedestrian retail that'll be more obvious in a number of neighborhoods. That'll be the next great frontier after.
Cool. Well, thank you very much, Jason.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. I appreciate the time.
Yeah, of course. It's the next 12, 18, 24 months especially will be we'll be making a lot of important decisions for generations to come. And I think I'm looking forward to have it be a very collaborative process within all of the different pieces or different groups involved. Because it should be a collaborative process.
Absolutely. Especially the evolution of a neighborhood needs the people who live there, and it needs the developers who are going to build those houses, and it needs the city, who the planners and everything else. Everyone needs to be on the same page for that to be a success.
That's it. We're all on the same team.
That's right.
That's it. Cool. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on the latest episode of the Walkable Ottawa podcast. If you want to keep up on our progress, make sure to follow us on social media at Walkable Ottawa, as well as visit our website for more information at walkableottawa.ca. If you don't want to miss the next episode, make sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast app. Thank you.